This is the new Nexx X.WST3 and this is the new X.WED3. In this video we're going to look at the good and the bad of both, and we're going to help you choose which might be the most suitable for you, and we'll have a look at how they're made by hand in Portugal. This video is sponsored by Calimoto, but I'll tell you why later on. Okay, so Nexx has a new distributor in the UK, which is why you'll probably see a fair bit of content about the brand around now. A few of us were able to visit the factory, which I'll show you while we go through, but what I really want to do is help you decide if either of these are right for you. We'll go through this in the same order as the written reports, but I would urge you to always check our massive library of reviews at bikesocial.co.uk, as I'm able to keep them constantly updated over months and even years. And I can go into more detail because, after all, most bike kit is a pretty hefty investment for most of us. Okay, let's look at price first. Both the street style X.WST3 and the adventure focused X.WED3 start at £329.99, and that's for the helmets with standard glass fibre shells. The X.WST3 then costs £349.99 for graphics on the glass fibre shell and £429.99 for the Zero Pro carbon fibre version, which is a proper carbon fibre shell, not just an overlay. The X.WED3 costs £399.99 for graphics on glass fibre, then £469.99 for this painted carbon fibre Wild Pro, which just shows off the carbon in the strip on the back. Then, if you want plain carbon fibre or graphics on it, it costs £509.99. There is a bit more to it though. Looking at the X.WST3 first, it comes with a Pinlock 70, which is mid-range performance for these fog-resistant inserts, and it's got a popper on the strap here. Now, the graphics versions come with an iridium visor as well as the clear, but still have the Pinlock 70 and the popper. The Zero Pro carbon fibre model doesn't come with an iridium visor, but you do get an 80% dark smoke visor as well as the clear one, and this time the Pinlock is a 120 XLT, which is the top level. Oh, and the end of the strap is a magnet. Now, looking at the X.WED3, you get a Pinlock 70 in the base version and all the accessories like action camera mounts. But it's only the Carbon Fibre Pro versions and the Keo, which is graphics on carbon fibre, that come with a Pinlock 120 XLT, an additional dark visor, foam bumpers on the sides that are said to help reduce collarbone injuries, the magnetic strap retainer, and a more premium lining with hydration tube straps on the skirt. So yeah, that's kind of confusing, but if you check out the nexxhelmet.co.uk website, it does have a table showing what you get with each one. Or of course, check the reviews because that goes into a lot of detail of the benefits and everything of each. Basically, these two helmets share pretty much the same outer shells with extra vent holes and the peak fixing points on the X.WED3. Now, the shells are made in the Nexx factory, which is just to the west of Arai in Portugal, using pre-made sheets of glass fibre or carbon fibre, depending on the model, and that comes from Italy. Each piece of glass fibre mat is cut at Nexx, then it's laid into a mould and formed and baked for about 8 minutes. The carbon fibre is more complicated. Once it's been cut, it's still in the same place, it's laid over the top of a soft mould to get the weave in the right place. Then it's placed into the mould and baked for about 15 minutes. So Nexx makes about 300 shells a day, and each carbon fibre helmet has someone working directly on it, so hands-on, for 197 minutes. That's surprisingly specific, but the factory works to pretty much an on-demand basis for materials. So understanding how long everything takes is crucial, and of course, that 197 minutes doesn't include that baking time or drying times of the paints and stuff like that. It's just hands-on time. So once they're baked, the shells are weighed to check them, then they're trimmed and have the apertures cut by a high-pressure water jet robot. Then they're sanded by hand and any filling is done again by hand, and then they're sanded again. A clear primer or seal is used on these so the carbon fibre lids can show themselves off, and they're sanded again for a smooth finish before going off for painting. On the plain carbon fibre lids, the edges are airbrushed, which gives a great effect but also covers the natural, not imperfections, but the way the weave sits. Anyway, it makes them look cool, and only the most cosmetically perfect carbon fibre shells will be used in the lids without paint. Now, none of them have any safety issues, of course, but you don't need to worry about the weave being perfectly aligned on lids like this that only have a small bit of carbon exposed, which is why they can be a little bit cheaper. Quality control is checked throughout the production process, and any glitches are either remedied or rejected. And this helmet had actually been rejected at the final stage because of these two tiny fisheyes in the paint. And the box was very clearly marked as not to go out. And while we were there was a bit confusion over the lids we were going to be using out there. And Nexx didn't have many available of this. So when we were there, they said to me to use this while I was there, then they'd send me a perfect one afterwards. And that seemed a waste to me, so I insisted I keep this one. But I also think it's useful to be able to see the level of quality control that we can expect, as this is such a small cosmetic imperfection, but it had caused the helmet to be rejected. And I don't mean just rejected for journalist use. Now, the shape of these helmets is clearly quite aggressive, and I think it's fair to say that it has echoes of a Ruroc. That's not to say that Nexx is copying Ruroc by any stretch, because Nexx has been doing this kind of style and shape for a long time. This is an old Voyager I've had for 7 years, I guess. I don't wear it anymore. But when I reviewed the Atlas 4.0, I was really disappointed in it due to some issues with the EPS lining poking out of the visor aperture, vents that are cosmetic only, a clunky visor fastener, and chin strap as a throwback to the terrible old seatbelt style straps we used to have. So this is an ECE 2206 helmet, which means it meets the much tougher standards now demanded, including an impact on an angled anvil to test for rotational forces transmitted to the brain. Also, any accessories that are designed by the manufacturer for the helmet have to be included in the test. So that includes the camera mounts and the optional intercom.
Hello.
Nexx has its own in-house lab that it uses for development and random testing of helmets pulled from stock. So, you know, they're like many helmet manufacturers, they are constantly testing these. Nexx also has a rig that tests the visor and sunshield mechanisms thousands of times. Anyway, let's look at those camera mounts. So the X.WST3 has one that you can fit on the side, but the X.WED3 also has one you can fit on the top with or without the peak, and another one you can fit on the chin. Now, I'm not a big fan of chin mounted cameras as it's such a common view on YouTube, but you do get a good solid fix in here, even if it does block the chin vent. If you want to use a camera as a dash cam, both of these give you the side mount. But yeah, the X.WED3 has more options. The X.WED3 also lets you use it in different ways. You can have the peak on or off with the little plastic blanking screws supplied, and you can have it with visor or goggles with blanking plates for the sides too, to grip the strap. And you can have it in any of those combinations, so no peak but with goggles, for instance, which fit really well in the aperture. I really like the ridges moulded into sides, and especially the clip on the back for the goggle strap. There's also room to get the goggles up under the peak when you're not wearing them. There's a lot of fuss made about helmet weight, and I'm conscious that it does seem to be an issue for some people, but in almost 30 years of riding and a lot of different helmets, I've never had an issue with one being too heavy. But equally, if they drag, that's what's more likely to cause you an issue. Now, on naked bikes, I was really surprised that with the peak on the X.WED3, it was really good until motorway speeds when turning your head. But that's to be expected. Both of these have a little more drag than others when you turn your head, even without the peak. And I guess that's a slightly slab-sided design of them, but it didn't bother me. What I think's interesting is that some people used to buy into the trope that Arais are heavy. But in a medium, the Arai Quantic weighs 1,588 grams on my scales. The Shoei GT3 is 1,678 grams. This Nexx X.WST3 is 1,767 grams in glass fibre, and this X.WED3 is 1,752 in carbon fibre without the peak. It's 1,867 grams with it. Now sure, the Arai doesn't have a sun shield, but the point is that most 2206 helmets are heavier than some 2205 lids were. But the 2206 lids are also provably safer, and I can't tell the difference in weight of any of them when I'm riding. Inside, the EPS shells are the same, with lots of ports for the air to move, but it's the X.WED3 that makes the most use of them. So both lids have these brow vents. They're a little fiddly with thick gloves on, but despite having the sun shield behind them, you can feel a little bit of extra air below down out of these small slots and onto your face. Now, any helmet with a sun shield is going to struggle to get air to the front portion of the top of your head because of this big gap up there. It's a tricky one, as most people will say that a shield is vital on a touring lid, but getting air moving over your head is also really crucial in hot weather. I have to say that the Arai Quantix set a very high benchmark for venting, but it's got to be helped by the fact that it doesn't have a sun shield. Anyway, both of these lids have a vent at the chin and direct air up behind the visor and through to the mouth. But there's a blanking plate supplied to cover that mouth vent if you want it. It's kind of annoying that it's easy to poke the foam mesh in when you carry the lid, but you do learn to avoid it. Now, the X.WED3 has the more direct mouth venting, but it is an adventure lid. Looking inside, both have these vents too. These port to the holes in the padding of the cheek pads, and while I haven't felt really much difference, any air moving around has to help a bit. They'll probably be more valuable on the X.WED3 when you're using it with goggles, because obviously the visor's up and they're exposed. Up to the top, and both have this pair of top vents, but there's more porting on them on the X.WED3. It also has this centre vent too. It's a bit more fiddly to get to with the Peak-on, but it's fine. To the back, they both have a pair of exhaust ports here, but the X.WED3 adds another two lower down. Now, something I noticed on both, which seemed more obvious on a bike with a screen, is that when I turn my head, the wind jets in harder in these top vents. It's not uncomfortable or anything, but you just notice the wind at a specific point on your head a little bit more. Well, a fair bit more. Venting's good, really good on both of these, but the sun shield does limit things slightly. Having said that though, while riding in Portugal, I spent a lot of time with the sun shield down and the main visor open, which was lovely. And I do have to say, still, the venting is impressive. Anyway, the X.WED3 has the edge on venting, as there's more holes in it. If you want to seal these lids up more in the cold, you can add the supplied chin skirt, but it is really fiddly to get properly poked in. I found using the edge of a plastic ruler seemed to help. Now, both of these helmets use the same visor, which has a great field of view, both up and down and to the sides. But remember that the coloured X.WST3s also get an iridium one, while the Pro carbon fibre lids in that and the X.WED3 get an 80% dark tint one, as well as the clear. I love how easy it is to remove and refit the Nexx visor. One of the best systems out there, I reckon. And the visor locks down and can be cracked open. Then there are 3 stages to fully open. I'd have liked something before this first stage. That's a bit high. Something about here, but yeah, it's just in my eyeline as it is. Both of them have the same drop-down sun shield, which is moved with this lever. It comes down well, and there's no annoying gap of light at the bottom, but the nose cutout is a little bit big, I reckon. A bit smaller, and it would have been perfect. Now, Bike Social member Ben Cordy has also been testing the X.WED3, and he noticed the same thing as I did on the X.WST3. In cold, damp weather, the pin lock can get overwhelmed and create a mist patch here on the surface around the nose. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to spread, but neither of us could find a way to avoid it after about 20 minutes riding, and it was in the worst weather. Now, since I got the X.WED3 myself, the weather has been a bit better, and I barely noticed it. It does seem worse on the Pinlock 70 of the cheaper versions of the helmet than the 120 of the Pro versions, but it did happen on both. Now, this is the only real criticism both of us have on this helmet, but at least it doesn't seem to spread, and it's not appearing to be an issue as the weather gets a bit better. Let's hear from Ben now what he thinks of this helmet.
So for the past month, I've been riding with the brand new Nexx X.WED3 as my day-to-day helmet. I've done lots of commuting miles, lots of kind of adventures out into Yorkshire Dales, a few bits of trail riding as well. Specifically, I've had the Wild Pro version of it, which is a full carbon fibre shell, painted in this lovely kind of dark teal colour with some carbon fibre detailing down the centre line on the top of the helmet there. And overall, I've been really impressed by what Nexx have managed to achieve here. It's a helmet that is absolutely packed with features, but actually useful features, things that it feels have been really well thought through. I've particularly just loved how versatile it is. It's so simple to convert it from its kind of full adventure setup like this with just a few thumb screws into slightly more street street style with a peak removed. The fact they managed to squeeze in a drop-down sun visor as well into it, it's something you don't see in a lot of adventure helmets, but incredibly useful when riding in changeable conditions. And then with the visor removed and the kind of goggle strap, which they've got on the back here, it makes for a really good off-road helmet as well. So I've loved how versatile it is. It's also packed with little touches like 3 camera mounting points, one just below the chin vent here, one on the side here and one on the top, and they are just really discreetly done. So I've loved the way they've managed to add those features without taking away from the overall design of the lid. But mostly, I think the thing I'm most impressed with is that Nexx have managed to get the basics just right with this. It's a really comfortable helmet, even for kind of long days riding. They've managed to walk that really fine balance between a nice snug fit without any pressure points around your head, and also the materials used on the liner and the neck roll are all lovely premium feeling materials, so it just feels really soft to the skin, and perfect for kind of all day riding. And it's also really impressed me with how quiet it is as well. I'm used to riding in kind of premium sports touring helmets, and I tend to go for the quieter ones on the market, and this easily keeps pace with those helmets. It's really surprised me in that way. I did find a little bit of droning for me with the visor attached at higher speeds, but that's likely more to do with the screen setup on my CB500X here. Of course, as with all things, it's not been perfect. The most significant niggle I've had with this is that throughout my use, I've had problems with the pin lock misting up just below the nose. That's been pretty consistent, so that's a real shame because the visibility on this visor is just one of the best features of the helmet. But as soon as that fogs up, you lose that, of course. And I do hope it's something Nexx might be able to improve with a slight change to the design of either the pin lock or the visor. I did also have a little bit of an issue with the cover for one of the camera mounts, which broke on the first time I removed it, which is a real shame. I imagine anyone using those mounts will fit and remove those many times during this helmet's lifetime, so for it to break on that first go is a real shame. But those couple of issues aside, I've been really impressed with what Nexx have put together here. It's a fantastic helmet, full of features, really versatile, and definitely something worth considering if, like me, you do a lot of commuting miles or distance touring, or enjoy a little bit of trail riding from time to time. This is an incredibly versatile helmet that does all of that and does it really well.
Now I want to quickly tell you why this video is sponsored by Calimoto. If you've watched my videos and read my reviews and reports on bikesocial.co.uk, you'll hopefully know that I don't usually do sponsorship, as I'm obsessed with being completely independent and unbiased. But for several years I've recommended Calimoto as a great navigation app just because I believe it is. So when they got in touch and suggested doing a promotional segment, I figured it was a good way to help pay for some of the big stuff I've got coming up without compromising my integrity. Calimoto really did change the way I ride thanks to its brilliant algorithm. If I have a free afternoon, I like to open the app, set a round trip of say 100 miles or so, then I just let it do its thing. You can tell it what direction you want to head and you can reshape the route, but I've honestly discovered so many fantastic roads, even quite close to where I live, that this is one of my favourite ways to get around. You can use it for destinations too. Those rides will usually take a fair bit longer than if you're using Google Maps, but I can pretty much guarantee they'll be a lot more fun. You can really easily plan routes in as much or as little detail as you want on your phone, a tablet, or on the web-based app on a Mac or PC. And it's always proven way more fun than anything even Garmin's adventurous routing or TomTom's winding routes can do. But don't take my word for it. You can try a full version for free using the link in the description. If you don't like it, just cancel the subscription and you'll not be charged. Or there's a link to subscribe with 10% off. But whichever you use, I opted not to get any affiliate payment from it, so it really doesn't make any difference to me whether you go for it or not. If you love exploring backroads though, I reckon you should give it a go, as I'd never recommend anything I didn't completely believe in myself. Try it and let me know what you think. Right, I've mentioned the peak a few times, but do you need one? Off-road, they help protect you from crap thrown up by the rider in front. But far more valuable to most of us is that they shield your eyes from low sun. They really are a lot better than a dark visor or drop-down sun shield for this. So, especially in spring or autumn, I much prefer a lid with a peak. But they have disadvantages too. At motorway speeds, they can cause drag when turning your head or when looking up. But the shape of this one and the holes in it means it's pretty good. They can create noise, but the rubber dampers fitted on this one do seem to help. Trouble is, it depends on the bike you're riding and the shape of its screen and fairing. On the Yamaha MTs I was riding in Spain, I had no trouble at all, but on my GS with a standard screen, at speed, it shakes and makes a bit of a noise, but nothing really bad. At higher speeds, this one is prone to shaking more than others, as it's quite flexible, which has been done to make it bend in a crash. But at times on the GS, that shaking has made its way to the helmet itself. So I wouldn't wear this on, or this peak, on a long motorway blast, but for the back roads I love doing, it's generally fine. And of course, I can take it off if I want. Though I do wish Nexx supplied a small pouch to store the cover screws in. Having said that, you could just sling the peak in your luggage and leave the screw holes open if you wanted. And the screws that are on the peak hold themselves in place thanks to the rubber dampers. You get an extension for the peak too, which gives you even more sun protection, but I've taken that off when I'm riding the GS to reduce the vibration. Now remember, the bike, your riding position, height, and even the accessories you fitted to the bike can affect this peak and the noise on any helmet. Now I wouldn't say either of these are noisy helmets, but the peak on the X.WED3 might add some noise depending on your bike. But in my experience, the Nexx is pretty typical of others, maybe a fraction noisier than the Tour X5 on my GS. With the peak off, I'd say it's very good, as of course is the X.WST3. The Zonti's ZT350T creates a fair bit of noise from its screen, which I noticed, but that's the same with all the lids I've worn on it. On a naked bike, the Nexx X.WED3 and the X.WST3 seem good for noise, but it's going to depend on all those variables I mentioned as soon as you have a screen or a fairing. The chin skirt has made a big difference for me, the sound of the bike being much more noticeable with it out. And while opening the top vents adds a little extra noise, it's not much, certainly less than the Shoei GT Air 3, which sometimes has quite a roar. Ultimately, what one person says is great, another might reckon is really noisy. And even the fit of the helmet matters, as if it's too loose at the sides or neck, that can introduce noise too. Now, the linings in these helmets are similar, but the Pro version of the X.WED3 also includes straps for a hydration tube. They're said to be anti-sweat and hypoallergenic linings, and while it hasn't been hot enough to find out about the sweating yet, that's why I always recommend our written reviews, which are constantly updated, I can tell you they're comfortable and fully removable for cleaning. Now these sliders on the side make it easier to take out and refit the cheek pads, but they're also meant to be a safety feature, so the emergency services can get them out and remove the lid without too much force. Trouble is, unless you know how they work, the only guidance is from a small QR code on the side, just on one side of the helmet, and when you scan it, it takes you to an advice page from the Nexx website. From there, you have to select the region you're in if it's the first time you've been there. Then there's a list of options for all the lids, so an emergency transponder would need to know the model you're wearing. After that, you have a drop-down menu. The fourth option is remove lining. Click on that and it takes you to a YouTube video about lining removal. After an advert, you can watch how to do it. Now, I really hope that Nexx changes this QR code to link to a very clear, simple, step-by-step photo guide that comes up instantly when you open it. And it'd be good to have that label on both sides and made of a bit more resilient material. If it changes, I'll update the written review. Anyway, the linings are really good quality, and all the more impressive when you realise they're all sewn in-house in the Portuguese factory. Both of the Nexx lids use a double D strap, which to many is the best as it's always set just right and is totally secure. Honestly though, I prefer a micrometric ratchet on more touring focused lids as it's easier to use with gloves on. Anyway, the standard lids get this popper to keep the spare strap from flapping about, but the Pro versions get this magnetic fastener. Now the straps are a bit overly long, and on the standard versions the end after the popper is too long, making it a little fiddier to use, but that would be easy to trim and seal with a lighter. The magnetic fastener snaps into place very nicely, but its bulk makes it a bit fiddlier to pass through the D-rings. These aren't deal breakers, but they're little things that could have been a bit better. You can fit your own intercom, but it'll have to go up here on the side of to the back a bit, and you'll have some cable running down the side. It's not ideal, and you'll have to find space for the mic in the chin, but the speaker recesses are 48.5mm in diameter and up to 14mm deep, so you should get your own speakers in okay. Now Nexx would of course prefer you to use its own XCOM 3, and I've got to say it is very good, one of the best OEM intercoms I've tried. There's two of them, a standard Bluetooth only version that costs £169.99 or a Pro mesh version that's basically a Sena 50S for £339.98. Now the cheaper one is obviously based on a new Sena that must be coming out soon, as none of the current range match its specs. I tried the XCOM 3 Pro, that's the mesh one, in Portugal, and accidentally forgot to take it out when I went home. Sorry, Mirko. I did send it back, which is why it's not here now, but not until I'd done all the range testing and battery life stuff that I do in all intercoms. There's a link to it up here, so if you're considering it, I'd have a read, because if you buy the intercom at the same time as the helmet, you get a discount, normally 16.6% from Nexx and also from dealers. But yeah, good range and excellent usability. These two Nexx helmets are pretty good value. If you look at the base models with glass fibre rather than carbon fibre shells, they both start at £329.99. And the carbon fibre's a little lighter, but going by Nexx's figures, because I couldn't directly compare the same helmets, if you know what I mean, between the different constructions, there's only 90 grams in it. Now I've got the plain wild blue glass fibre X.WST3 here, and it's £100 more for the Pro carbon fibre version with the better pin lock and a dark visor, which works out pretty good really. And to be honest, I do reckon the carbon fibre looks awesome. An Arai Quantic in plain colours is £499.99, a Shoei GTR 3 is £529.99, or an HJC Alpha 71 is £399.99. For the X.WED3, this is the Wild Pro, which has all the extras and benefits of the Pro versions, like the 120 pin lock, side bumpers, dark visor and carbon fibres construction, and it costs £469.99. If you want to see more of the carbon fibre, the price goes up to £509.99. That's still £90 cheaper than an Arai Tour X5. That's in plain colours, this isn't plain colours. So the lids I'm comparing these two says something about the quality of the Nexx. Okay, they're not perfect, and I've covered my reservations in this video, but they do come recommended. If you're in the market for a street or adventure lid, I'd say you should definitely try them on. But the biggest question still hanging there is which one is the best of the two? As they're both in the same price in plain colours with the glass fibre shell, the X.WED3 makes most sense to me, as you can take the peak off and it's got the better venting. When you move into the Pro versions, the price widens by 80 quid, so then I'd say you have to really want a peak, though you do get more camera mounting points and more venting than the X.WST3, so it's got to be your call, but I'd say the X.WED3.